Hello, I'm Paul Briley, and you're listening to Off the Comma. I'm a human who cares about supporting other humans. On this podcast, we explore all facets of what it means to feel stuck in life. We talk with people just like us who found themselves sitting on a comma and not knowing where to go next. We'll unpack the experience with them, where they've been stuck, what it feels like, what they experienced, and what they learned. My goal is to inspire you by seeing yourself in others. I believe that when we feel more connected and seen, magic can happen. And remember, if you find yourself sitting on a comma in your life, you can also talk to me without a microphone. To explore coaching with me and getting off the comma in your own life, check out my information and book a call with me at offthecomma.com. And I'm also doing something different. I'm curating my own sponsor community, local businesses and professionals who I handpick and who align with our vision here. Be sure to check them out, learn more about them on my website and my YouTube channel. In the meantime, let's get into this week's conversation. And we are back. Welcome to the new year. And this is one of our newest episodes of 2025 at this point, and very excited to have another new kind of person in my world, someone I haven't met before and someone who I'm very much looking forward to meeting and learning about through her story today. And just another powerful contribution to our storytelling community, to, all of these vulnerable and authentic stories that inspire us by learning from other people's experiences. And with that, I'm going to stop rambling. I do this every episode. I think it's kind of become a thing, but I'm going to stop rambling and I'm going to turn it over to you, Amy. We're talking to Amy Ayres today. And Amy, tell us a little bit about yourself. Start with, how would you like to be known? And then you can tell us anything else that you'd like for us to know about you before we get into your story today.
Hi, Paul. Wow, what a question. How I would like to be known. That's interesting. I guess right now, I'd like to be known as an author, as someone who's visible in that space. That's really what I'm doing career-wise. But maybe if I were going to go deeper than that, I think I would like to be known as just someone who's done the work, I think, emotionally on herself, potentially someone who's self-aware enough to know that I'm flawed and that I can put that out there into the world and help other people understand, how important it is to be self-aware, to be authentic, to really think about their contribution to the world. And I am running out of words now. So
well, can I jump in? And I'll do this throughout, right? I'll jump in and reflect things, or I might ask a question or something like that. And anytime I'm reflecting something that doesn't seem like it's accurate or doesn't land, then by all means correct me. Or I've started using with some of my friends, like if I'm stepping in at the wrong time, push me out. What I'm hearing you say, though, really describes someone who's just honest. Like, you're very honest with yourself. Yeah. And it sounds like I'm reading a lot into it, but someone who's honest with herself, and as a result of that is unafraid to be honest with other people.
Sure. I appreciate that. I actually am podcasting myself. One of my podcasts that I do is I interview authors in the indie space. Mm-hmm. And they're always surprised about the questions I ask, because I ask very honest questions about the realities of being an indie author that a lot of people are afraid to talk about because they don't want to look bad in the space. They don't want to say things that are negative about potentially like about the publishing industry and detract from a future career they may have because they said the wrong thing. And I try to encourage them. It's never the wrong thing. It's not that you're being like offensive or mean to anyone. It's just that you're being honest about your particular experience and where you are right now and the obstacles that you're facing. Because many times in life, we face obstacles and we aren't honest about them. We aren't honest about how they're affecting us emotionally and psychologically. And then people really don't even know our struggle. They don't know what's going on with us. They may make judgments or so. To stop rambling myself, I think that's where I really try to drill down in my own life is like, no, let's just you be honest with let's cut the crap with each other. You know, I'm very much a cut the crap kind of person.
But So I like that. I'm writing that down because that's really
And of
cool.
course,
I
I'm
like that. But
censoring myself, but yeah,
no,
I
and
know.
please don't, because don't censor. Well, this is a space. This is why I'm so protective
Being
of the
super critical.
podcast. And folks who are listening won't know, the types of things that I explain and communicate to people, and people who might be interested in being on the podcast and so forth. But like, we don't apologize, because
Yeah.
this is your story. You get to speak your story in your way. And worst case scenario, if we need to put some disclaimers or trigger warnings in the show notes after the fact, then we can certainly do that. But
Sure.
don't edit yourself. But I really respect what you're saying, because I was kind of self-referencing for a moment, and I was thinking, like, how you really encourage and empower people to speak openly, speak about their experience, speak about their obstacles, be honest, because they're really just talking about what they went through. And it's just so unfortunate that, there's so many influences in our world today where there is a whole other set of people who want to hide these things, who want to deny these things, who want to pretend these things aren't there, or that somehow talking about these things can be harmful. So
Totally agreed.
I don't want to take us off onto another tangent,
Right.
unless it's actually fundamental to your story today. But I did want to kind of just acknowledge you for that.
Okay. Yeah, it is a bit. So I won't, won't take us too far away.
Well, then let's do this. Let's start getting into your story so that you can kind of expand on these things. And before, in a minute, we'll get into the 5 questions. As you know, with every episode, with every guest, I ask the same 5 questions, and then your story unfolds within that framework. But before we get to the first question, one of the things that I like to do with each guest is, Amy, as you look ahead to the next, let's say, 40 minutes or so, in telling your story, what intention would you have for yourself today?
I would like to potentially surprise myself, because I tend to sometimes think it through. I don't want to come in scripted. I'm very much an improvisational type person, but at the same time, I'm like, well, what am I going to talk to Paul about today? To think about it a little bit, But I know that sometimes when you talk about things like that, you dig deeper than potentially you would on a conscious level and get to like sort of an unconscious place. So maybe that something can be beneficial to like break through that barrier that, people tend to fear breaking through.
Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that. And that is often the experience in our episodes and our conversations, is that folks will come in with an intention, and they'll generally fulfill that intention, but also they discover that the story will tell itself. And that's what I talk to people about all the time. It's like, you can come in with an intention, but don't over prepare, because the story will tell itself. Amy, my intention for our conversation today is to support you in your intention, create space, a container for you to be able to share with us what you're going to be sharing with us. But also, with every single episode of this podcast, what I want to create is that someone or someone's out there will hear your story, and they'll see a little bit of themselves in you and your story. And it will make them feel a little bit more connected, a little less alone, and in the best of cases, feel inspired or even empowered to do something that they've secretly, or even not secretly, been wanting to do.
That sounds good to me. I mean, as a writer, that's what I try to do, is put stories out in the world that people can relate to. So ideally, it works out.
Awesome. Well, and I'm an avid reader and working on being a writer. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing your story as well for those reasons. Amy, let's jump in.
Okay.
First question is, where in your life have you found yourself sitting on a comma?
I love that you call it a comma. Like, of course, that would, interest me as a writer. There's just so many ways that commas can go wrong. But sitting on a comma, that's really interesting. To me, I think of just like times I've had to pause where I couldn't. You say being stuck. I see, being stuck, not being able to move forward. And I would say it's happened many times in my life, usually during a time when I need like a transitional phase from, graduating high school and trying to figure out my life after that, and then graduating college and trying to figure out my life after that, and then entering adulthood and, the dating sphere and being married a couple of times, and obviously sitting on comments during that time. So, I mean, it's something that's recurring in my life. And when I try to think about one, it's impossible to nail it down to one um, time period. But even now, I feel that things are moving forward for me in one way, but then in other ways, they are very much paused. It depends on the area of my life that we're exploring. So
can I jump in for a moment?
sure.
Like, and this is really cool because as a writer, as someone who can relate to the metaphor language and so forth, that already is cool. But you're introducing this other concept. Like, what's cool about this is that the metaphor is the metaphor, and every episode, every storyteller interprets it in different ways. Some people are like, yep, that was me being stuck. Some people have used different words to describe it. People have talked about sitting on a comma, standing on a comma, walking on a comma, laying on a comma, matrix of commas. I've heard people say that commas were not good things for them. And I've heard people say that, no, I chose the comma because I needed the break and the rest. And you've introduced a new visual for me, which is this. I'm a visual person.
Yeah.
So this element of, it's not uncommon for people to say, oh, many commas in my life. I think most of us would kind of agree with that, right?
Yeah.
But you're introducing this concept of, we often talk about the comma within the context of a single story, overlooking the fact that meanwhile, there's another story behind that and another story behind that, and that we have all these lanes going in our lives, and those commas might be showing up at different times, but they are overlapping, and one may be coming in, one may be going out. Like, so thank you for that. Like, this just whole new visual is sort of like everybody's talking about the multiverse, right now, like this visual of, okay, I can talk about this story where I sat on a comma, but meanwhile, there were all this other traffic and all these other lanes and all these other commas that were coming and going to.
Yeah. And you have me thinking, like, the multiverse has me thinking of, like, every time I got myself out of a place where I was laying on a comma, sleeping on one, maybe, outside of that experience, it was like I was rebirthing. It was like I was starting a new life, almost as a different person. Not necessarily always me, but I'm this other version of myself that's able to continue after whatever has occurred. And that's sometimes feels like, looking back, it's like that was a different person. I don't even know who that was or why they were doing that or why they were stuck, because I'm so much smarter now than I was.
Well, yeah, we grow as the story grows and evolves after each comma. So, Amy, I'm curious. You've got lots of examples that you could share, but I want to go where you want to go. So, I guess an invitation for you is, we could go and say, okay, well, because there's going to be 4 more questions to follow too. We could go and dig into, is there a specific example, for example, or a specific comma that you want to talk about? And or we could also talk about this kind of broadly in terms of what are commas like for you when they occur. Like, we could skip the specific details and talk about the collection of commas and trends and themes. I haven't really done that with a guest before, and you and I didn't even plan this, but where would you like to go? Would you like to talk about a specific comma or kind of talk about the commas collectively?
I mean, collectively talking about them would be a way to sort of kind of build the story as it goes, because I think everything is interconnected, the one experience led to the next experience, to the next, and to where I am now. So maybe that could be interesting.
I love it. And let's experiment with it. Let's see what shakes out. Right. Yeah. And of course, you're always invited to go into specifics at any point in time, or if you're like, wait, okay, let's go into this story. So, okay. So, where in your life have you found yourself sitting on commas? So maybe then you could talk to us about, and again, you take it where you want to after this, but where do commas typically come up in your life, or where do you tend to notice the commas the most? So the question is really to kind of help us get anchored into, like, where and when do they happen? Because we're going to explore what they mean and so forth in the following questions. But where do commas come up for you?
So what occurs to me when I think about it is, the best way to describe it is when something runs its course, whatever it is in my life, and I'm starting to get that feeling. that I need a change. But I'm in the spot of, well, how do I make the change? I don't know yet. It hasn't occurred to me what the change needs to be or what action needs to be taken, because usually if you're stuck or you're paused, you aren't taking action. You've gotten yourself to a place where it seems like you have taken actions to try and make change, but the change isn't coming. And I know that those probably are the most frustrating times in my life, is when I know that I want change, but I don't seem to be in control of the change happening. So I ideally try to avoid those situations where that's happening in my life, but they end up occurring anyway, despite my avoidance.
Yeah.
So that would be how I would describe it.
I hear you talking about, as you used this word earlier, the transitional periods, the transitional spaces. I know I need change, but you really describe the frustration that comes with not being able to predict, not being able to see where it's going, where it's coming from, when and how it's happening, just kind of being there without being able to control it, as you said.
Yeah, exactly right. And it's problematic because often I'm in these situations because I don't know, because the status quo seems to be the best scenario, but the status quo can't occur anymore because something's wrong with the status quo. And whether it's internal or external, if it's external, it feels outside of my control. And that's how life is. If I've learned in my life that there are many external factors to life that are beyond our control, and humans are unpredictable and life is unpredictable, with illnesses and deaths and, losing a job. I mean, I could go on, but those aren't usually things in our control. Yeah. But they change things often irrevocably, and they change us in a way where we're just not the same after.
You talk about external. What about internal?
So internal too, sometimes, we want things in life and they aren't readily available, or we're not ready for it. Or, sometimes, it's funny when we're adults, we think we want something and we just go out and get it. Like, how hard is that? And when we're kids or in adolescent age, it's like harder because we're not in control of our lives and other people make decisions for us. So they say, you can't have this, or you can't go there, you can't do that. And we go, oh, okay, you know best, But when you're older, it's like, no, I do want to do this and go there and do the thing. And it's just like the universe is like somehow still preventing it, like a parent would. Saying, no, you can't do this, you can't go there. This thing's getting in the way.
Yeah, that's really descriptive, right? Like the parent element, like when you're a kid, the parent telling you can't have something, then the universe telling you can't have something. And like we're kind of reacting in the same way throughout, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's happened a lot in my life where, I'm an adult now and I can make my own decisions, but there's just some sort of obstacle in the way, something greater than me that I can't, just gets in the way. That's the best way I could describe it. And, when I was younger, I used to look at that as what like bad luck is. It's, I have bad luck in this area of my life. That's why these obstacles keep coming up. And it's me, like it's something in me that makes me unable to achieve these things. So that's where the internal, I think, comes from. And then a lot of people say, well, that's self-sabotage, like you're getting in your own way when you think like that. And it just doesn't feel like that at the time. It doesn't, because you're like, why would I get in the way of what I want? That doesn't make any sense at all. Yeah.
You're speaking my language. That comes up so much. It's like, you choose that. You chose that. You created that. And I'm like, what the?
Yes, exactly.
But you're describing to us though, like that whole dialogue that can happen within us, right? That's that is circular and so forth. Anyway, I interrupted you. Continue.
No, and I'm glad you understand that, because I know that some people, they go through life perpetually optimistic. And I like to say sometimes that people, talk a lot about privilege, and I think privilege is definitely a thing. I think that there are some people who um, benefit from certain things and get things easier, and they don't understand why it's just a struggle for others. And they say, well, you just have to have a positive mindset. That's the only thing stopping you. You just keep having a positive mindset. And I feel like in my experience, that's only part of the equation. Like, a positive mindset helps you get to the next stage, but it doesn't actually provide everything for you that you need, to achieve. And that's just me cutting the shit again.
Well,
like someone said to me, just need a positive mindset. It feels cheesy,
And yet you just prompted something for me. If I could jump in for a moment.
Yeah.
I think I hear that too. We see this all the time, right? So this isn't like, nobody's ever heard of this before. And yet it's so nuanced, right? Because there are those who are like, oh, you just think positively, blah, blah, blah. And it's dismissive, right? It's basically just, and this is my opinion based on my own experiences, but it's basically people saying, be positive and shut up so I don't have to deal with you, right?
I agree.
And that can be for 1,000 different reasons, right? I can't face your negativity. I don't want to hear your negativity. You're ruining my space, whatever. And yet, okay, so here's what came up for me that's fascinating is I think it's easy sometimes for us. I'm coming back to you because this is your story. You tell me if this is true for you. Sometimes it's easy for us to feel like, oh crap, I don't have a positive attitude. I'm being negative, da, da, da. And I think it's possible to actually deconstruct that, right? Like that can be true. And like, it can be true that I don't have a positive attitude right now. And it can also be true that overall, I do have a positive attitude. And right now, I'm just experiencing a very intense emotion that you don't believe aligns with my positive attitude. But I think it's possible that both can be true at the same time. Like I do have a positive attitude and I feel like shit right fucking now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now I'll shut up.
Yeah.
What's your experience?
On that though, my experience has been that often the people who have that platitude, it's a nice way to put it, because they grew up hearing it, and they believe it's the answer to all things, and they grow up with the mindset themselves of complaining doesn't get you anywhere, and not only that, but complaining is sort of seen as detrimental. I don't want to use the word sinful, but some people would use that word.
Some people believe that, sure.
Yeah. And so if you grow up, I think, with that mindset, it's really easy to sort of just throw that in other people's faces, it's like, oh, I have the opportunity to tell someone how to live their life, so I'm going to do it. And in my experience, it doesn't help anything, especially when you're really, I used examples of death and job loss and illness for a reason, because these are the big things I've noticed with people. Often they think they're making an excuse, saying, I can't achieve this thing because, my mother just died and I'm not over it. I'm still grieving. And other people are like, well, just have a positive mindset. Like, it doesn't work that way with grief. Like, it just, no, you have to work through grief for as long as you need to work through grief. And then you come out the other side a different person. That's how grief works. Okay. And maybe it never really fully goes away, but that's not I just use that as an example. That's not been my experience, but I have grieved other things, and that's how I felt. And I know that's usually the answer for a lot of people, is they just say, oh, well, just be happy, basically. Like, sometimes it's just, things in life make us sad, but there are things that grieve us, and it doesn't feel within your control. It doesn't feel like, and it feels like a place where you can get stuck, like mentally, emotionally, and no amount of positive thinking is going to get you out of it.
Yeah. But let me reflect back what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
from our conversation, right? Because we're talking about your experience with commas collectively, right? I'm hearing, the themes of, yes, being stuck, but also the sense of being controlled, powerlessness, helplessness that can sometimes come because you're unable to control the outcome, as
Mhm.
one kind of theme through these. And then the other theme of other people's discomfort with your comma.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that idea is very important because sometimes your pause can make other people feel like they need to pause and they're not ready to pause, or they don't even know how to pause. It's another way. Some people, it's so funny because you think about how some people are just sort of type A, they're go, go, go. They never stop, they never take a break. And I can't imagine people like that sitting on a pause. I'm sure it happens, but in my mind, it's like, does that happen? Because it doesn't, they don't show that to the world, I'm a good example, like,
and or they're
yeah,
not showing it to you right now, right?
right.
In that moment. Yeah.
One of the things that I think kind of annoys me about social media, just putting it out there, is I think that's a lot of people's highlight reel. Some people are more honest, but a lot of people just put out to the world all the good things that are happening to them, and they maybe think that that's a great thing to do, but they project this image sometimes of like, nothing ever goes wrong in my life. I'm never sad. I'm never unhappy. And nothing ever goes wrong. My job's always great. My marriage is always great. My kids are always great. My relatives are, the best people ever. And then if you're not in those situations at whatever point in your life, think like, what am I doing wrong that, my job is not great, or my marriage is falling apart, or, I don't get along with my relatives. And whether one or all or three are happening, it's like, why? Like, and this other person has it all figured out, but they don't. They just want to project that to the world. They want to project the smiley, happy pictures and the positive
and
mindset.
that's
Yeah.
yes, right? Like, that's the social media is all about positive mindset, right? Or
Yeah.
or supposedly folks demonstrating it. But I think it does two things, right? Like you said, the danger, the risk of social media is we get caught up in the comparison trap and believing that we're somehow less than or inferior because we're not measuring up to all of these pictures and photos, right?
Yeah.
And it's also an opportunity for us to recognize that platform is often where people only want to show their best side or only want to create a certain image of themselves.
Right.
And that's okay, as long as you realize and recognize that it will never share or show the whole reality, the whole truth, and that there's always more behind what you're seeing.
Right. And then when you talk about that, it almost seems like you're wishing something bad would happen to somebody. It's not really what you're saying. It's you're saying, is it possible that you could share your experience with going through something not great and letting the rest of the world know how you got through it? Maybe that would be more influential than you coming across as like a rock who's never moved in a sense. Because to me, I feel one of the things that's superficial, I think, about social media also is that I feel like the people are supposed to be your friends. Like initially with like Facebook, it was your friend count, right? And you accumulated friends over maybe a course of 20 years. And so you maybe have like 5,000 Facebook friends or something like that. But then it has me thinking, like, are all of those people actually your friends, or are they acquaintances that you've met over the last 20 years that just are like barnacles on your life? Mean way to put it. I don't know. But, or you're maybe a barnacle on them, you don't know fully how. It would be lovely, I think, if you had a meaningful relationship with all 5,000 of those people in a perfect, ideal world. But you don't. You don't know them fully. They don't know you fully. And it's just, to me, it's strange that you would consider someone like that your friend. They may be, branch out a little bit and say, like, they're my colleague, or they're, my ex-boss, or they're my best friend's cousin or something, but to call them a friend just
Yeah.
feels inauthentic.
Well, and this is why you prove this point, why I believe that words matter and labels matter, because there's the word and what it means, and then there's the word in terms of how it's used all the time, right?
Right,
And
right.
they're called friends because that's literally what the button says, right? And
Mm-hmm.
because we're pushing that button with that word all the time, it
Yep.
becomes the word. But you're challenging that, and you're saying, well, just because I use that word all day every day doesn't mean that that's what it is. You may be clear on that, other people may not be clear on that, and who's willing to challenge it? It's like, well, no, that's just the button.
Right.
That's just the button that
Yeah.
I get to define, what the actual connection is between us.
Right. And I may be
Yeah.
getting off a tangent on this social media thing, but it's just something that I do think about sometimes when I try to think about whether my relationships are meaningful or whether, I'm being honest with myself or other people are being honest with me. And I often I go back to that social media space of like, there's a large chunk of my life often that feels dishonest because everyone I know is putting on a brave face and so am I. And no one's really being fully honest with each other, or at least embracing things in an honest way.
Mhm.
And that's difficult, I think, sometimes to cope with.
Yeah. Well, I want to acknowledge you because I'm going to go to the second question next. But what I'm hearing in your collection of commas, and you tell me, how
Mhm.
this lands, if it lands, is you've described, first of all, that when you are sitting on commas in your life, there's a lot of places that you could sit on a comma for a lot of reasons. And it takes you into a very introspective space because you've talked about commas while you're grieving. You've talked about commas where your mindset isn't necessarily air quotes positive because you're exploring things or feeling things, right?
Mhm.
You've described commas that have to do with relationships, how you feel about relationships, how you define relationships, as you've described with the social media example. So,
Yeah.
what I've heard from this kind of collective conversation is when you're sitting on commas, you really go inward and get
Mhm.
reflective and thoughtful. And I'll stop your words. I mean,
No,
how is
100%.
that?
That is true because, I consider myself, I'm giving yourself a label, I'm a little neurodivergent, I'm a little
Hmm.
bit of an introvert. I'm like an extroverted introvert. People say like, I can't believe you're gonna just see me like on a Saturday at 7:30. I just want to be in my pajamas watching TV. I don't want to
Hmm.
be out at the
Mm.
clubs and partying and stuff like that. It's just not me. But I try to like, I like people. I like meeting people. I like talking to people and getting to know them. But I need that private introspective space too. I need to
Mm.
maybe be reclusive in a way sometimes that might, baffle people, where it's like, uh, I need to think and reflect. That's probably why I'm a writer. I like journal my whole life and have all these,
Mm.
thoughts. And what do you do with them besides write them down? But I, you know, it is the necessary, I feel, to just take that time and just think things through. I don't know. Maybe it's good. Maybe it's bad. Maybe you
Mm.
overthink a little bit, but
Mm.
it's just a natural occurrence, I think, for me.
Well, and it sounds like it's natural for you. It's part of your process, and
Mm.
that's what you do, right? And
Yeah.
you can evaluate that if you want, but in the telling of your story, it seems like, okay, this is something that we've come to know about you. Amy, the second question is, and you can kind of go back and forth in the telling of any of these stories. The second question is, as you look back at these collection of commas that you've sat on through your life at different times, because we're talking collectively, answer this however you want to. What does that create for you? Or what has it created for you?
So are you referring to like how it's built up over time? to?
Well, there's a lot of flexibility in that question. So normally, if you were talking about a specific time in your life that you were sitting on a comma, you would tell a little bit about it and give us some of the background. And then when we say, well, what is that? What has that created for you? Or what did that create for you? Some people are like, well, this is where I am now. Some people are like, this is what it was like at the time. Since we're talking about kind of what commas are like in general for you, maybe you've already answered some of this question, but what do commas create for you in your life?
So, okay. So I think that the comma really leads me to a big change. And historically, that's been maybe a big move. Like I was talking to you earlier about how I used to live in San Diego. And that was a big move for me because currently I'm in my hometown, like the Philly suburbs. And that's a huge move. And at the time that it happened, it felt inevitable. And like if I didn't do this in my life, then I would be kind of stuck where I was for the rest of my life. The person I was at 17 would be the person I was at 42, and there would be no deviation. And I needed a deviation. I needed a change of scenery. I needed to see what I was capable of. And that's usually something that comes after a comma, I think. It's like the immediate say, okay, I need to change whatever it is, if I'm sitting on a comma because I want this thing the universe doesn't want me to have, I'm going to go get it. Like I'm going to defy the universe somehow. I don't know if that's always the best thing, the best choice, but it feels inevitable sometimes. And I've done that probably 4 or 5 times in my life where I was just like, screw you, universe. Just you say I can have us, watch me.
Okay.
So,
well, and again, like no one can judge or criticize or critique. This is your experience. So, oh gosh, there's like 3 places I want to go with this. Like, first of all, let me reflect. So often sitting on a comma creates for you, like, I need something new. Like I need a big change. I sometimes need to go grab or kind of take ownership of that change. And you've talked about one example of geography, like needing to move to a different place. Are there other examples of where it was just a fundamental shift or change and you had to go out and grab it?
Yeah. I mean, relationships ending. I feel like usually there's a comma right before that. There's just like, I've done all I can do in this situation and it's time to move forward. And if that means moving in a different direction than you, then that's what's going to have to happen. Sometimes like a career change is a good example. I'm sure it comes up a lot, but where I just said, this has served me as long as it's going to, and I really want to pursue the thing that I always wanted to do. It's so funny because I don't know if you've experienced this, but sometimes you make the big change after thinking about it a lot. Where, you might be just like sitting in your bathrobe and you're on your bed and you're just like, okay, I really want to start a podcast where I talk to people about their lives. And I've been thinking about this for like 3 years and it needs to happen tomorrow. And that's just how it happens sometimes, because how long are you going to sit and think about it? And when are you going to take that first step? And then you look back a year later after, recording 50 episodes or something. And you're like, wow, I recorded 50 episodes of my podcast. And that's nothing. I wanted to have recorded 150 episodes by now, or 1,000 episodes, because the comparison game again. Well, my this person I know who's doing it is is a lot better at it than me, or they have more episodes recorded, or they have more visibility on social media, or they have more blah 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 blah. And then it's like, but you have to think back to that person that was like, I need to start a podcast tomorrow because it's my dream. Like that person would never in a million years have like imagined how far you've come.
Yeah.
When you're thinking about how you're still not good enough and you're still haven't achieved as much as your peers. And so I think we often, that's when we get, so then we're on another pause and we think, okay, well, how can I get to a place where I feel like, I've achieved what I wanted to achieve 3 years ago or whatever, you know what I mean? And it's just like a perpetual thing that keeps us moving forward.
Yeah. Well, I want to expand on something that you said too, because like you're describing this element of looking forward and looking backward, like
Yeah.
looking forward to what could be, looking backward at, how far I've come or how far I haven't come, right? So this
Yeah.
constant like looking and reviewing, which is really, I mean, that fits in with what you've been describing,
Yeah.
right? This kind of constant review and study and explore. But also I love how you said like this, you were talking about this element of how long you think about things before you actually do something. And I so appreciate that, just for my own reasons, my own stories that I could tell other folks who have shared the story about, it starts with an idea, then it turns into a little bit of a vision. And sometimes then that's the point that people are ready, to act on it. And we hear a lot of advice from folks, as soon as you're ready to, or as soon as you think about it, take action, take action, take action.
Right.
And sometimes it needs to incubate a little bit longer, right? So there's this element of sometimes you need to think about it for a while before you're ready. And then I believe that sometimes people don't really realize how long they have been thinking about something when it feels like that they literally just did it out of the blue.
That's really interesting. Yeah, to think
Because
about that.
like I got involved I quit drinking 3 years ago, and I got involved in some sober coach training and so forth. And so we talk about people's experience on the journey of quitting drinking, right? And one of the things I'll credit Janie Lee Grace and the Sober Club, because this is one of the things she taught us. But these phases of evolution before somebody gets to the decision that they are going to quit. And one of them is pre-contemplation, where you're thinking about it, but you're not aware of it. To bring it into what you're sharing in your story is sometimes you're aware of the thinking and you're allowing it to happen. And sometimes it feels like you just did it, but you weren't aware of the fact that you really were contemplating, visualizing, thinking about it. So I'll shut up. What's your reaction?
No, it does feel like that because in hindsight, you think about all the things you thought about, times you thought about it. Like, I don't know if you've ever done this in a relationship, but you when you're dating someone or, you're in the new relationship, sometimes you think about the old relationship and how it was different and how that person did things you didn't like, and you really are able to look back and say, oh, you never do this thing where they used to do this thing where, they used to like leave a spatula in the sink and then yell at me and say I did it or whatever. And then, and then the other person's like, wow, what a jerk, and then like, and then you learn new things about that person that are like similar and they do things that like annoy you and stuff. It's just like how relationships are. And you realize, okay, this is what I can basically tolerate and this is what I can't tolerate. You know what I mean? Everybody has their quirks and their own version of crazy. But go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and take it a step further too, right? Like, oh no, this is new for me. I've never experienced this before. But then you go rummage through. If you're a journaler, right? Is that a word? Can I use it? If you journal, then you go back and dig through your old journals, or like in my case, like I dig through stuff that I wrote journaling when I was in high school. I go through the high school box, right? Yeah. I was like, holy shit. Like I'm sitting there writing about stuff that I wrote about yesterday and thought it was the first time I was ever writing about it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So,
it's so
like
funny.
in your example, like the spatula in the sink and, I guess I don't like that. And but then you go back to your high school stuff and realize like you got yelled at as a kid because your mom didn't want you leaving the spatula in the sink.
Yes. And that has actually been a revelation in my life too, because so many things like I credit actually the relationship I'm in now to that, because the person I'm with was on a very similar journey where they were confronting for the first time in their life things that happened to them and when they were in their childhood and adolescence, and they were just like, wow, like I never thought about this. And they too like went through a divorce that was very messy, and on the other end of it started thinking about those things and being like, well, maybe a lot of this happened because of that other stuff that happened. And like they're making all these connections and working through it. And then I'm coming in the situation like me too. Like I'm really like, wow, like I'm seeing all of these things and learning new things about myself at the exact same time.
Mm.
And it's really interesting because we came out the other end of it better people, but that's hard. That's a difficult road to walk, especially with somebody else, at the same time. And that was what you were saying, that's exactly how it felt.
It's a great bridge to the third question too, because you were just talking about learning. And so I'll ask the third question, modified for the purposes of our conversation today. What do you learn about yourself as a result of sitting on these commas? Or you can give specific examples of things you have learned about yourself from any comma or them as a whole.
I think that I've learned ultimately, I think overall, if I look back on all the commas, that I tend to be the kind of person who tolerates things I shouldn't. In the past, I'm a lot better about it now. About voicing what I need and what I want. I credit years of therapy to that. I had an amazing therapist who was like, Amy, tell people what you need and what you want. And I'm like, wow, well, is that a thing I can do? That's awesome. I never knew that growing up or in my previous relationships and job situations, etc. But looking back, it was like I had gone through I would go through a period of time where things weren't not great, and I was waiting for them to get better, and just sort of waiting on the comma for the thing to get better that just didn't want to get better, because it was not the right path for me anymore. But the ultimate mind-blowing thing was, even though it stopped being the right path, it was a path I needed to go down to come to that realization. So we think often, like, I'll just use relationships as an example. So you break up with somebody and it didn't work out for whatever reason. And I think your first inclination is, I never should have dated that person in the first place, or we never should have met. But then you think and reflect back and you're like, well, if we didn't meet, then this other thing wouldn't have happened, or I wouldn't have met this other person, or I wouldn't have had all these experiences, or even I wouldn't have had these positive experiences with that person that changed me in a way. And so I think we just have to learn how to accept that, these are good things, even when they feel like they're bad things.
I really appreciate you sharing that. And thank you for doing so, because, a couple of things, right? Like, and this is a little bit of just me, like my opinions and my self-reflection is like, we hear a lot, going back to what you were sharing with us about people telling you just have a positive mindset or just be positive or think positive or whatever. People will also tell you, oh, well, something good will come of it, or it was meant to be, or those. Right. And that I'm the kind of person who like, I'm all in, right? Like me too. And, through my coach training and some of the study and the work and the research or the reading and so forth, like, how you described, sometimes you need to go down that path, even if it was a dead end, because, it's also about what you learn about yourself along the way, right? What did I learn about myself? How did this serve me? What did this bring me? And so, because I too was like, it never should have happened in the first place. Nope. Everything happened exactly. You had a great time up until the point it wasn't a great time anymore. So don't erase the past. But also, authors who will talk about the whole, it's not that it necessarily had to have been good, but you can go back and review it, which you have said you're the kind of person who does. Yeah. And you can look at it and say, what good can I pull from it? Right. Yeah. So there's these schools of thoughts like, oh, it happened for a reason versus what was the reason that I will extract from. Exactly. Yeah. I'm more of a what was the reason than to just go about my life and be like, all these things happen for a reason. It's, I stubbed my toe on the table for a reason, because some of it don't feel like we get anything out of it, but I accept a sore toe. And I learned that I hate stubbing my toe, and I learned that I yell like a sailor when I do, right? Me too. I do it way too often. It's not a good problem.
But
Okay.
but I like, yeah, I have again like so many stories in my life because of choices I made that were either good or bad, you know.
Mm,
And and that was something sometimes, you know, as writers we sit down and we can't help but pull from our life. And I know I've talked to a lot of writers who have meant to doing this too, where they have to, and sometimes they have to because they need to work through something that happened and the only way they can do it is to write about it. And I found in doing this, like I find that there are really beautiful, amazing life experiences that I've had that were heavenly at the same
mm,
time that I was literally in hell. and
mm,
and to contend with that with somebody who has like a very limited mindset of like black and white, like good, bad, you know, and it's I feel like you just need to have a little bit more depth and nuance and like look at things in a different perspective than I think that's conventional in order
mm.
to get that experience.
You reinforce this,
Yeah.
both can be true at the same time. That's
Yeah.
so powerful what you just
Yeah.
said. Like, I've had some heavenly experiences while personally being in hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just amazing.
And then when
Amy,
you, yeah,
oh, go ahead.
sorry. Well, I
No,
was
go
just
ahead.
going to say, and in my experience, it's always a surprise to me because I like, I sat down to
Mm,
work through this as a terrible experience and to write for an hour about how much I hated this person. And then at the end of it, I'm like, yeah, but there was that one day in September that was like really nice. And, you know, and then you're like, why is that coming up? You know? So we just have to be, I think we have to just be kinder to ourselves and in those
mm,
experiences. And it's it's not all about looking at everything positively. It's about looking at everything honestly, I think.
mm. Ooh, okay. Oh, so much gold in that, right? Like, I
Yeah.
was already going to acknowledge you for the allow yourself to be surprised
Yeah.
message, right? Like, and often what I'm hearing you say is often that can come when you sit down to write it out, right? Like,
Hmm.
journaling doesn't have to be, oh, I'm going someplace specific with it. It's like, this just happened, this experience, this thought, this emotion or whatever. Let me journal about it and let me just kind of write. But you almost have to just be okay with the fact that I don't know where it's going to go. It's all going to be a surprise. Let's see
Yeah.
what comes out of putting pen to paper. And then, as you said, those surprises can be very pleasant ones.
Yeah.
And you're not, when you're journaling or writing or reflecting in whatever form that you reflect, right? Like, the intention isn't to turn it around. The
Hmm.
intention is
Hmm.
to review it honestly and
Yeah.
let come what will come, which often can be something that is, I keep wanting to check my words, right? Because I was gonna say it can be something that's received well by yourself, but that still implies that it's like positive and good. And that's no, it's something that you are grateful for getting, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And in that reflection, I think some of my worst writing was when I wasn't honest about what happened. And I
Mm,
was trying to make it sound better than it was, or that I was trying to take like a positive spin with like a moral at the end and a happily ever after or something. And
mm,
there's just something very like cliche about that. You know, it's not it's not a positive experience to look at that and be like, that's not a real, like, that's not how, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but what,
what I think I'm hearing you say,
yeah.
though, is sort of like, I can't remember if we talked about this on the mic or not, but about what I'm hearing you say as a writer, your experience is if you don't let the story tell itself
Mhm.
and you try to control the story, then it doesn't go where you want it to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Mm,
in that, where the censorship thing comes in, where you're thinking the whole time, like, oh, someone's going to read this, or, you know, my mom's going to read this or something. And then
mm,
you're like, I have to make this sound a certain way so that it doesn't upset anyone. And then it's just garbage because it's just,
mm,
there's something so inauthentic about it. And you just, yeah, you made me think about that, because, you know, looking at life can feel like that too, where where, you know, if you're like unhappy in a marriage and then you know deep down you're not, but you're telling everyone that you are happy.
Mm-hmm. You're telling yourself
and
that
you're telling
you are.
yourself which is
I
the
think
worst.
that's what you're talking about when you talked about self-censorship, like, and being honest. Like, it starts with not telling yourself.
Yeah. And then whether you have some sort of like pressure from, you know, society or from the people in your life to remain positive and to pretend that things are fine, you know, then eventually it's going to come out. It's, to me, it's like, truth always reveals itself. And that's when you sit on that comma when you're like, okay, I think it's time to tell everyone that I've been miserable for the last 5 years and they had no idea. Or it's time to confront this person about this thing because we can't move forward until we did. And it's explosive sometimes. People don't like the truth. They don't like change. They like pretending. And I have come to the point in my life where I just can't do any of those things anymore.
Well, and that comes through so clearly, right? And even, you know, if we were to rewind and replay the episode, right? Like, we can see how that started to show itself in the earliest things that you were sharing with us in your story. It's got to be truthful. It's got to be honest. It's got to be authentic. Let me ask the fourth and fifth questions, and then we'll start to wrap things up here, which is hard for me because clearly you and I have rapport in the story, and I'm loving your stories and being able to kind of jump in. The fourth question, Amy, is, as you look back at the commas that you've sat on in your life, since we're talking about them collectively, what has changed or what is changing as a result of these experiences?
So I think the last thing I revealed is a big part of my life now, where things aren't always pretty and they're not black and white. And that doesn't mean that it's bad. It doesn't mean that you're unhappy. It's just that you are experiencing life in an honest way. And the people around you know exactly how you feel and they know exactly who you are. And they're not one of the 5,000 people on your Facebook friend list right? Who don't know who you are and have no idea what your story is. And so for me, you know, it's surrounding myself with people who get me, who understand what I've been through, who know my backstory and who I'm trying to be as a person. And if I meet someone who's like, that's a bit much, I don't know, I can't handle his honesty. Well, then I guess it's not on me to be like, oh, well, let me censor myself so that you like me. Like, I just, you know, I think that comes with age. You just don't do that anymore. It's not important to have people like that in your life who you're constantly censoring yourself for.
Well, and it comes with age because it comes with experience. And by that meaning what you've shared with us, you've been through the thing, you've sat on the comma, you've gone through the challenge, you've experienced the heaven and the hell that comes with it. You've done the reflection, the evaluation, the learning. And sometimes you've gone out and said, fuck you, universe, and grabbed the damn thing, like reached for the next vine. You know, it's not just age, because a lot of people age sitting in one place and never do a fraction of the things you're talking about. It's the experience, right? It's the experience that comes with doing things and taking risks and just trying shit out through your years as you age.
Yeah. And it's fine. I don't always get along with kind of people who, like we talked about a little bit, who do kind of sit in the same place forever. And it's almost like their whole life is comma. They just don't know it. You know, I don't want to trash talk anyone or anything, but I'm just saying that I think in life experience comes from change and taking risks. And you may believe that living in your hometown and never moving away, or, you know, I don't know, marrying your high school sweetheart or whatever is an ideal way to be. But I think that you're maybe missing out on, you know, what life has to offer in some ways. That sounds so mean.
Well, it represents your beliefs, right?
Yeah.
And your beliefs are based on how you experience your world. And that's your belief, your story. Nobody can take that from you. But what I'm hearing from you is that it's very important for you to be in motion, to be able to have the freedom even though it doesn't feel like freedom sometimes, according, it
Yeah.
sounds like the ability to take the risks and to grab the next vine and swing the next distance.
Yeah. I feel like I'm never done. I'm not a big proponent of, like, I know 42 isn't old, but depending on who you talk to, some people think 42 is really old, that
Yeah.
I should be done. Like, I should hang it up
Mhm.
now at 42, which to me is ridiculous, but I don't want to hang it up at 62 either. So,
I'm
that's
going to self-reference for a moment, and I'm going to tell you, my friend, because 42 is where you're at now. Is that it?
yeah.
So, obviously you're the oldest you've ever been. So
Yep.
on one hand, you are old because you're the oldest you've ever been. But let me tell you, listen to a few more episodes here, not because I'm trying to promote the podcast, but listen to people's stories. For all that you've shared with us today, I'm really freaking excited to hear what you write about in your 50s. Because it's the 50s. There's this magic thing with us humans that when you get into your 50s, I can't wait. That's all I'm going to say.
That's exciting.
Okay.
That's
I
only
need
8
to
years from
ask,
now.
yes. Well, and you don't have to wait, but the stuff that's going to happen just naturally. I can't wait to see.
Oh, sure.
Amy, last question, and maybe kind of brief in your answer, or sum it up, if you will. What does getting off the comma look like for you?
Getting off the comma is after a bit of self-reflection, a bit of understanding next steps. Right now, I think if I would say if I'm on a comma, I think it's with my career. I think that I feel like I'm sort of in a jumping off point where I could go literally anywhere at this point. And I think that I am sort of waiting for that push to go in that direction of wherever it's going to lead me. But it'd be nice if it was soon. I got to sit and think about it.
It sounds like it's time for another leap, as you were
Yeah.
describing before,
Yeah.
right? It's time something needs to change, and it's time for a leap. And it sounds like, you tell me if I'm wrong, but you might be in that space just before you're like, fuck it, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm ready to definitely take some risks in my career and get things really off the ground. So just wait.
Okay. Yeah, wait and see, right? Amy, thank you so much for sharing this story with us and all the vulnerability that comes with it. I mean, that's really what we want to create here is it's just people telling about themselves, and it's very honest, right? And so, as we look at the last couple of things before we close, one is, where can people find you and look you up? I'm going to put all the links and everything in the show notes. But if folks are interested in seeing what you're up to, maybe want to connect with you, talk to you more about your story, where can they find you? Talk us through it.
Sure. So I mostly live on Instagram right now. That's where you'll see a lot from me. And I have Amy Ayres Writes is my Instagram handle. Amy Ayres Author is my TikTok handle, which I'm working on building up my TikTok, but it's a thing. But I'm actually I wrote a sci-fi dystopian series called Lucy Winter Scott series, and it's on Amazon currently. And it reflects a lot of the things that I talked about in this episode, honestly, either indirectly or directly.
Nice.
I definitely take some knocks at social media in the series, so it's like always front of mind. But you can find those on Amazon, and I'm just really excited to meet anybody or talk to anybody about what I'm doing. And this has been a lot of fun.
Nice. Okay. Well, I encourage folks to go and connect with Amy and check her out. And the last thing we do, you've come here to tell us your story. This podcast is all about sharing stories and learning from each other and lifting each other up without being experts and giving advice. And we couldn't do that without also giving you the opportunity to lift some folks up in your circles, right? And so I call this section acknowledgements because it's an opportunity for you to give a voice to, boost, promote folks in your world that matter to you. And that can be causes, organizations, loved ones, other creators. Who would you like to create? And I'll make sure that they show up in the show notes as well.
Oh, sure. So I'll start with Katie Time Podcast. I talked a little bit about I'm a podcaster, and she and I have a podcast together called Storytelling Sidekicks. And her Instagram handle is KD Time Podcast. And she's really going for it. An awesome person, really clever and funny, and has a lot of really interesting things to say. So check her out. I want to talk about Katie Reads and Writes, who is another upcoming indie author. She has a book out right now called Love and Other Alien Concepts, which is an amazing title for a book. And she is just really she really pays it forward to a lot of authors in the community. So I just wanted to see, she has an educational series, and she does help a lot of people with different authorly pursuits and everything. So I just wanted to, Katie Reads and Writes on Instagram. There's KD and KT. I know a lot of Katies. It's funny.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Katie, Catie, O'Neill, and KD Time Podcast. And
I didn't want people to get confused.
And tell us, I didn't even, it was funny because you and I, we trade that information beforehand, so I can put it in the show notes. Tell us the name of the human being behind KD Time Podcast.
Oh, KD Time is her name is KD, KAYDEE. That's like her podcast pseudonym. So that's why I put it out there. And then Katie O'Neill is the author behind Katie Reads and Writes. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention a Women in Publishing Summit. I actually I work with that organization. We do a summit every year for women in publishing. Men are also welcome, but that was the CEO started the organization because she didn't feel that there was a space specifically for that. So she's been doing it for a long time and doing really amazing work. And I just want to give them a shout out too.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that and for lifting these folks up. And I want to acknowledge also all of these are women creators and women-led organizations. And that's so super important. That matters to me because women have always been the ones who had the greatest influence on my life since the very beginning. So I appreciate that and want to acknowledge you for that as well. So
thank you very much.
Amy, thanks for being with us for this episode. And everybody go and check out Amy, learn more about her writing and her story. And I wish you a wonderful, at the time of our recording, a wonderful weekend ahead, and look forward to seeing and hearing more from you in the future.
Thank you so much. It's been so much fun.
Have a great weekend.
You too.
What an honor it is for me to witness these powerful stories. I hope you feel the same way too. Think about what you learned from this conversation. What stood out for you? What challenged you? What inspired you? And I encourage you to write it down in some form of journaling and reflection. Surprises can reveal themselves to you when you do this. And if you were moved by today's conversation, pass it along to someone you care about. Let's spread the word. Let's continue to build connection. And if you do discover something you'd like to unpack further, book a call with me and let's talk about it. My links are in the show notes. Be sure to like this episode, follow the podcast here on this platform and social media at Off the Comma, and feel free to comment and interact with these posts and episodes. Check out my website for workshops, events, and my sponsor community. I'm covering the costs of production by curating my own sponsors who align with our vision. Be sure to check them out. They're all powerful people and businesses. Thank you for listening to this episode of Off the Comma. As always, keep noticing and keep listening.